Sil Givun entered the room, eager to hear the news of the xenobiologist's studies of the soon-to-be invaded and conquered species known as humanity. In his long tenure as the Goivun, the head of the Goai Imperial Unity, he had earned a reputation for his skill in the art of war, conquering worlds thought to be impossible to invade. Sil had done this not by a simple overwhelming force or technological superiority, as his predecessors had, though the Empire had both to spare, but by his insistence on learning everything about a species before firing a single shot. By the time any form of battle could happen, he and all his subordinates would have a perfect understanding of the enemy's capabilities, methodology, biology, and even their psychology, and would exploit that knowledge with utter ruthlessness and efficiency, turning their cities to ash even as he manipulated their very ways of thinking to their ultimate defeat. By the end, the subjugated sentients not only surrendered, they submitted entirely, abandoning their inferior languages, cultures, and methods, and embracing Gyai Nok until the former primitives were practically Gyai in all but shape. Sure, some fought more than others. As inferior as the ways of the rest of the galaxy were, the urge of species to retain their identity and uniqueness was a universal concept. But in the end, the supremacy of Gyai Nok over all others was undeniable. Gyai Nadol, Dor na Gyai, Dor Nok na Gyai Nok. All are the Empire is all, and the Imperial Way is the all way. Enter the Gaifun, shouted the lead xenologist, bowing along with two colleagues as Sil sat down. Sil noted that their scales were oddly discoloured, their mandibles shivering much the same as their voices. Signs of heightened emotion, but not necessarily distress. Most odd. Conqueror or not, Sil was not one to ignore the well-beings of his subordinates. What is the matter? If it interferes with your duties, you may always select others to your position, until you can cleanse your minds of imperfections. The lead xenologist shook his head, as he and the other two sat across from Sil. Forgive me, Aigivun. The situation is more complicated than you know. I am Jor Gibol, the fourth to be placed as Gibol since the investigation of the humans began. All of my predecessors suffered imperfections also. Two of them are in the learning halls for proper thought restoration. Compared to them, I have fared far better. The human Nok is stranger than any we have encountered before. Forcing them to adopt Gyai Nok will be perhaps the greatest challenge we have ever faced. Sil couldn't help but click his mandibles in a chiding but consoling manner. Do not fear to show me. I have seen terrors beyond your years. Nok so primitive and crude that it turned the bravest warriors to madness not even the learning halls could heal. But Aigivun. If you cannot bear to look, you have my permission to turn away as you display your findings. Not everyone has the stomach to look at truly terrible Nok, but in order to lift them out of their depravity, I will have to witness it myself. Jur paused, almost afraid to speak. It is not that it is depraved. I cannot say what it is. It makes little sense, but I shall attempt to endure to elaborate where necessary. All I ask is that you brace yourself. With a gesture of his tentacle, Jor activated the holotable, as his colleagues looked away, not in horror, not even revulsion, but in some indescribable emotion that had no name. The image of a statue formed. An odd feeling passed through Sil, as he found himself unable to tear his eyes from what should, by all logic, be nothing more than a hunk of chiseled stone. It depicted a human male, frail and clearly deceased, held in the lap of a human female with a subtle expression of deep sorrow, a sorrow that Sil could somehow not help but feel as well. It was as if the emotions on display were carved into the stone itself. What is that? Jur's voice quivered slightly. It is apparently meant to display a demigod in human mythology after his death, held by his mother. That was what sent the first Gaibal to the halls. It only took him one look to be affected so greatly. He was highly regarded in our field, but his replacement was many times his better. It took the next example to remove him. Evidently, it is a moment from a work of visual fiction based on human literature. The image shifted to show two small humans on the side of a mountain, covered in ash, bleeding from wounds, eyes red from heat and dryness and weariness. One of the humans was in clear distress, cradled in the arms of another, who proceeded to lift his comrade onto his back and carry him up the mountainside. Syl had seen similar acts of valor in warfare. All warriors had. But this... something was different, and he did not know what. He stilled himself, shoving away thoughts that disgusted him as best he could. Dolnok Nagyainok, and somehow managed to recover enough to gesture for Jur to continue. My immediate predecessor, Garov Gibol. Syl felt a burst of recognition and mild horror at the name. I know of him. Garov is one of the mightiest souls I have ever met. Are you saying that he could not withstand the horror of a primitive knock? Jor hesitated briefly and averted his gaze a bit. He tried. He truly did. But this was too much for him to bear. It was too much for me to bear. I have yet to find a replacement who can watch and hear this without being overcome, and yet none of us could cover our ear holes. We turned away, but we could not listen. Before Syl could even begin to think of what Jor meant by that, the image changed into footage of a human with a small stick-like object in front of a large seated crowd, his back to them as he faced a smaller but still sizable group, equipped with various items that he quickly identified as musical instruments. And then they began to play. The sound was quiet to begin with, a single breath instrument with a flared tip playing a simple melody, and several other humans drew odd sticks across the cords of small instruments on their shoulders. The melody repeated, other instruments trading places and joining in, until the melody gradually quietened down to nearly nothing. Syl had managed to retain his composure, but barely, his will nearly crumbling multiple times. He began to recover, only for all instruments to join in on one last, slow, powerful, and majestic, triumphant even, restatement of the melody. It was this moment that seemed to draw the breath from Syl's body, his mandibles quivering, his scales shifting through several different colors, as he did not know what to feel. As the last note played, however, he finally realized what that emotion was. It was awe. Awe so powerful that it shook the soul, and drew reactions that would otherwise be associated with sadness out of those who experienced it. Awe beyond anything he had ever known. And although he knew it to be heresy, although he knew it to be entirely impossible, not even a constant internal repetition of Dol Nok Nagyainok could prevent the only conclusion his mind could reach. Jur, we cannot conquer these people. We cannot bring them to Gyainok. Why? Asked Jur, still attempting to recover from the same experience. What is it? What about their knock is so terrible to us? Again, it was heresy. Heresy and impossibility. But it was true, and Syl knew it. The reason we cannot bear to witness their ways of thought is simple. It is not that it is terrible at all. It is that it is beautiful. We cannot lift them up, because they have lifted their own knock to heights we can never reach. In the end, all present would have to be removed from their duties and sent to the halls. But the memory of the beauty, of the power of what they had seen, that could never be forgotten. And to Syl's horror, he did not want to forget.